Yo, I'm Kurose Gaming, and welcome to the channel. And for today's review, oh snap, it's gonna be an RPG as you probably can tell. Hey, at least this one didn't take too long, only took about 33 hours, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't, oh man, I've lost every ounce of patience in the last droplet of my sanity that I was saving up for this next semester of college. Well, nonetheless, let's talk about Final Fantasy III.
So let me get the sentimental stuff out of the way first. The Final Fantasy franchise was my first introduction into the world of JRPGs. Hell, I'm pretty sure it may have been a first for a lot of people, and who can blame them? This franchise has consistently brought out good games over the years, has impacted the gaming industry in many ways, and even affected the business decisions made over at Square Enix.
Yeah, I'm dead ass, look it up. But what about today's game that we're going to be talking about? You know, this bad boy right here? This bad boy right here?
Final Fantasy III released in Japan on April 27, 1990 on the original Famicom. The game's plot focuses on 4 young orphans who's tasked by the Crystal of Light to bring balance to the world. This game was a Japanese exclusive for a while. How long, you may ask? 16 fucking years. Why so?
That's why.
Final Fantasy III would eventually release in the West via a remake released on the Nintendo DS in 2006. It would be ported to multiple consoles such as the PSP, iOS and Android, the fucking Ouya for some reason, and later a PC port. This remake pulled up with new 3D graphics, updated music, quality of life improvements, a new dungeon and secret boss, and a little bit more story in the beginning. For the most part, the game had good reviews, though there are some that weren't impressed with the graphics and criticized the speed of battles.
Well, let's not waste any time, let's get started with the review.
For this review, I will mainly be covering the PSP version of the game, but I'll call back to the original as well. Okay, so the plot. Shit. Final Fantasy III's story is in every way simplistic. From the series of events, the heroes and villains, yeah, this screams an early JRPG plot. While the remake adds a more in-depth intro to the game, it doesn't really change much. Hell, explaining the story of the game is just going to spoil the shit you go through.
So, let me at least explain my issue with the story. As simple as it is, this will probably be the easiest thing I can do.
My main issue with the story is that it's inconsistent. The first half feels like it's just filler, with the main story ever so often coming along. You know that you have to look for the crystals, but along the way you also get fangs? Hell, you don't really know about the purpose of the elemental fangs until late game, nor who is the true threat of the game, with slight hints being thrown here and there until you're on your way to the surface world. Now, once the second half kicks in, then the story is more organized and straightforward. Now, one thing I do appreciate is that the remake at least gives personality towards the 4 main characters. You have the adventurous Luneth, the shy and intelligent Ark, the motherly Rafea, and the calculated Ingus. Everything else is not bad, the pacing is just right, and to be honest, I can't be mad at the story's simplistic nature, cause at the end of the day, it is an early Final Fantasy game. They're not extremely deep. Maybe besides Final Fantasy II.
Okay, with that out the way, let's talk about the gameplay. Yeah, let's talk about the gameplay. Final Fantasy III is a hard game. Actually, wait, let me rephrase that. Final Fantasy III is a game that will test you. Not like Shin Megami Tensei, but damn they're close to it.
Final Fantasy III is your standard turn-based RPG. You choose your character's action ranging from attacks to even being able to change your equipment in battle, which was a unique addition in the remake. As you play throughout the game, you are given a temporary 5th party member who can help out in battle, though sometimes they just don't show up. Dash, I'm looking at you.
Now the remake does something pretty interesting regarding the job class system. Now yeah, Final Fantasy III was the first game in the Final Fantasy franchise that introduced an interchangeable system that will be used in later Final Fantasy games. So what's the interesting thing, however? Well, let's check it out.
In the remake, you start the game as a freelancer, and as you find each of the 4 crystals, you gain new jobs. Originally, certain jobs were locked away by doing certain side quests, and when switching jobs, you have to use up capacity points. In the remake, this is thrown out the window for a much less grind-heavy system of just having to do a number of battles for your stats to change. Each job also have unique skills, such as the ninja being able to throw items at enemies, these being able to unlock doors without the need of magic keys, summoners being able to summon different monsters, and a Dark Knight being able to use a strong physical attack at the cost of some health. As you continue to use that job, you gain levels, which increases the proficiency of that job, meaning more MP for melee-related classes and stronger defense or attacks for melee classes.
Now, how do I talk about the equipment and the magic? The damn magic. Okay, how about this? Let me start with what I like, specifically the equipment.
The equipment handle in this game is customizable to an extent. Depending on the job, you can either use swords, staffs, or all of the above. This applies to defensive items as well. Depending on the weapon, you can actually dual wield it. By doing so, you can increase the power of your attacks at the cost of some defense. And it's actually worth it, as for the most part, the chances of you dying from an enemy is low. Now, the damn magic. Magic in this game is split into 8 levels, with the 8th level being the strongest. However, you only have a set amount of times you can use it. Plus, in order to use the magic, you either have to find the spell through chests or buy it at a magic shop, meaning you're going to need the dough to buy the spell and grind to be able to use higher level spells.
As such, this brings us to a major point of this game, grinding. Yep. Final Fantasy III in every way is a game that you must grind in. Now, I'm going to assume y'all played Final Fantasy X before. Oh, nigga! If you have gone to the late game to go up against this motherfucker, then you probably know exactly where I'm getting at with this.
While the bosses and enemies aren't too hard to deal with, once you get to Eureka and the Crystal Towers, you're gonna want to wish you grind before then. Grinding like in other JRPGs is for the most part slow and monotonous, though if you play the PSP version or the PC version after last year's update, you get auto battle, which makes it a whole lot better. My advice for grinding would be to grind a bit before each dungeon, gather health items, then grind a little bit in the dungeon before fighting the boss. In doing so, it makes the grind less annoying. Now, I haven't played this boy in a while, and when I started grinding, I became overpowered to the point where most bosses, besides the final boss, were going down after about 2 to 4 turns. This is what happens when all you've been playing for the past few years is Shin Megami Tensei games. Oh god.
Alright. So, what do I like and what do I hate about this game?
Okay, let me talk about what I hate first because Jesus Christ. Movement in this game is slow as hell. Whether it be walking through the world map or through dungeons, it feels like your character is moving through molasses. Now luckily, dungeons are short and never overstay their welcome, but going through the world map is not fun at all. However, it gets a little better thanks to the transportation that you get as you progress through the game. First, you have the airship that gets destroyed by using a mental ram. That's great. Next, you have the Enterprise, which is a traditional ship that gets turned into an airship, only to be destroyed later on. What the fuck? Next, you have the Nautilus, which is the fastest ship in the game, though quickly becomes useless, because the final ship in the game is the Invincible, which scales up mountains and is great for late game grinding. Oh, speaking of which, this reminds me of another thing about this game. You don't know exactly where to go next. Beyond a few people giving you hints on where to go ever so often, you're not going to know nor be guided to the next area of the game. As such, you more likely will be using the strategy guide for this game, which is annoying as hell depending on what guide you decide to use. Okay, so what do I like about this game? One thing you'll be pleased to hear is that Final Fantasy III's enemy encounters are low, meaning you don't have to worry about constantly being bombarded with enemies. This is also great because this game encourages exploration. You learn early on that by zooming the camera in, it allows you to see sparkly items, which after interacting with it will show you hidden rooms filled with treasure chests. Alongside that, by helping certain NPCs out, or in general completing quests, they allow you to go to their treasure as well. Like, look at this gnome about to give you his treasure. Kurose, that's a dwarf. Yeah, I know, but you do be moonwalking though. Finally, the music, man. Yes! The remake's music is orchestral, which enhances the impact of a lot of tracks, especially the final boss theme. Plus, if you don't like the new music, you can change the soundtrack to the original version, which is great as well if you're playing the PSP or the PC version.
So in terms of a verdict, I will say you should play this game. However, be aware, even though the remake introduces a bunch of quality of life improvements, at the end of the day, no matter what version you play, it's still an old school JRPG, so be prepared to put some time into this game.
As stated earlier, the Final Fantasy franchise was my first introduction into the world of JRPGs. It was the gateway for me to play other JRPG franchises such as the Tales of series, the Xenosaga trilogy, and especially the Megami Tensei franchise. Without Final Fantasy, I wouldn't think twice about playing a JRPG that isn't Pokemon. What do I think about that? Nah, I'm not gonna. No. Anywho, and yeah, I suffer my own sanity going through this game, amongst other factors such as power outages, my laptop crashing, and life in general just being an ass right now. However though, I can say that I enjoyed the experience I had with this game, and I'm actually happy that I finally was able to beat this game. And fun fact, this was my third Final Fantasy game that I've ever beaten. The first two was Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy 15. Take with that as you will.
With that said, the review is done. So basically, we're practically done with this little marathon? Retrospect? No, we're going to call it a marathon. Anywho, though, the next review is going to be, or not the next review, technically the last review for this marathon, you know what I mean, is basically going to be a little Sega CD classic from the movie director himself, Hideo Kojima. So, afterwards, let's talk about a couple of games, get prepared for the next marathon, and also get prepared for college. Oh, shit. Until then, though, stay safe and stay vibing, my guys.